Hi friends, welcome to episode number 11 of our Master Planning Level 1 series. I'm sure that you have been following some of the key concepts which are related to master planning in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation. And I'm sure I'm also checking out the comments which you are writing out in this video and in all the videos. And I'll try to cover more of the scenarios related to the whatever the concepts which we have discussed right now. And throughout the series, what we have discussed. And in this episode, we will primarily discuss about the concept of safety stock journal and how do we kind of update the minimum stock level in against each and every item by using the safety stock calculations. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel D3 Talks or follow my profile in LinkedIn. With that note, let's quickly jump into today's topic. So let's quickly get into today's topic of safety stock journals. Yeah. So if we look at the agenda, so already we covered 10 episodes regarding our master planning level 1 series. And in this level 1 series, we'll also talk about the other important key concepts like the safety stock journal, minimum maximum keys. And from the episode number 13 or 14, we'll primarily try to cover the scenarios which will help you to kind of correlate and connect the dots, whatever we have discussed so far. So we just don't want to immediately get into the scenarios. And I'm sure some of you also commented regarding the same that you really want to understand the various scenarios that can be achieved, whatever we have discussed so far. And because immediately if I get into the various scenarios and talk about the time fence, actions and safety stock, you will not be able to relate that. But since we have already covered at a very high level on the various concepts related to that in master planning, I think from episode number 13 or 14 onwards, we will be able to quickly get into the various scenarios. And we'll also try to see if there are specifically a couple of episodes we can plan which can cover the master planning scenarios related to planned purchase order. So this episode we will be covering about the safety stock journals, why we need to use safety stock calculations and perform it. First of all, the definition of safety stock is the safety stock indicates an additional quantity of an item that is held in inventory to help reduce the risk that the item will go out of stock. Right. So the safety stock is the quantity of the inventory which you hold in the hand, in the on-hand inventory, so that in case of any additional requirements that comes in order to avoid any loss of sales. That's the reason we keep the safety stock. It is used as a buffer in case sales order comes in, but the supplier can't meet the customer requested ship date. So you have created a sales order, but you not the supplier is not able to supply the material, or because of some reasons your production line is unable to fulfill that particular item, and then you want to utilize the safety stock. And the master planning, whenever it runs, it always considers to fulfill, it also generates the planned orders in order to fulfill the safety stock, not just only the demand which comes from the sales order. So the system always tries to prevent the accumulated quantity of an item from falling below its safety stock limit. So this is why we discussed about the net requirements in the previous episode, and then we want to get into the safety stock, because when we calculate the safety stock, the master planning engine tries to always prevent the accumulated quantity of an item. So maybe we'll quickly show to you. If you are following the series, I think you will be able to connect the dot. So in case of safety stock, it always gets referenced to the net requirements. If I get into release products, let me get into any of the item and the plan. If I get into net requirements, so when the master planning engine runs, it tends to check the accumulated quantity, and we already discussed about that in the previous episode. So that based on the accumulated quantity, the system tries to reserve the safety stock, and based on which it generates the planned purchase orders or the production orders based on the default order settings. So the accumulated quantity of an item is very important, and it prevents the accumulated quantity from falling below its safety stock limit. The next thing is, at the same time, we also need to be sure about the various types in which the safety stock can be fulfilled. When the master planning runs, the engine detects that the accumulated on-hand inventory for an item will fall below its minimum. It creates a planned order. So before even it, based on the projection of the issues which are happening in your system, the master planning engine tries to prevent the stock going below the safety stock, and it creates a planned order to replenish the item. and schedules order to arrive before the minimum threshold is crossed. So this is the important aspect to it. So how this fulfillment happens, we'll also share a Microsoft Learn doc where I will also share that link in this video's description. You can go through that and get a detailed understanding of how the safety stock fulfillment can be achieved. And generally the safety stock is fulfilled on today's date plus procurement date. So today's date meaning on the day in which the master planning runs. So if we are running the master planning engine today, the fulfillment date will be considered from today plus the procurement time, which is the lead time. And this lead time can come from your default order settings in the plan or from your trade agreement if you are running for a specific vendor. So that's about stock fulfillment. So primarily we have three ways in which this minimum value can be updated. First, you need to be aware of where we need to update this minimum value, which is the safety stock. We can call it other way also. So for against each and every item, if I have selected the item under plan action tab, if you get into item coverage, so here you can specify the minimum stock. This is what is called as the safety stock level. Even if you see here the help text, it clearly so here you can see enter the minimum inventory quantity or the safety stock level. So this is where we update the safety stock level for each and every item, and this value is primarily expressed in inventory units, and this is considered in order to generate the safety stock and the planned purchase orders. So this is also an important configuration. So what are the ways primarily? So that's what we were discussing here. Like one way is primarily adding with respect to site and warehouse, what is the minimum inventory level. We can update this manually. Let's say for this item for site, let me check what is the site which we have. So for a specific site, specific warehouse, if you want to provide a minimum inventory quantity, you can do that. I'm sure that we should have a site 1, warehouse 11. Let me put it as 100 quantity is the minimum inventory quantity. Let me save this. So we can provide the minimum inventory quantity which is considered as the safety stock. This is a manual way of updating the inventory level. On the other hand, we can also use the DMF framework. So using the data management Excel upload, you can also update the item coverage data entities and then import the data into the system so that the appropriate values are populated. The third way is primarily the discussion for today's episode, safety stock calculation. So this is primarily the way in which system tries to calculate based on the historical transactions which the item has, and based on which it recommends what is the minimum or the safety stock quantity which should be updated in the system. So this is purely based on the historical transactions. It is not going to consider any of the demand forecast or your expected orders which gets registered into your system. So it's purely based on the history of the transactions. So let's now probably discuss detail into the safety stock calculation. But in order to do the safety stock calculation by the system, you need to create a safety stock journal, and then in order to complete the safety stock calculation, you need to post the safety stock journal, right? And then if we check the page, then the minimum quantity will be updated based on the safety stock journal, whatever we have posted. That's what we are going to see in this episode. So for example, in this case, if for 111 it is minimum and minimum quantity is 100, and then first step what we have to do is we need to create a safety stock journal. If we get into master planning, and then under the setup you have an option called creating the safety stock journal names. First you need to create so in the system there is no safety stock journal names. First you need to create a safety stock journal name, and then once the safety stock journal name is created, let's say safety stock, give a description, and then by default the journal type is always safety stock. You do not have any other option to update here. It's an enum, so by default it will be safety stock journal. And you can also provide a private user group. This is primarily given by the list of users under the planning team, the planning executives or the planning manager, who will primarily the user group will be created, and this is a separate form where you can add the list of users, you can add or remove the users, and you can add the appropriate user group to the safety stock journal name. So for example, let me go ahead and add the approvers. So this is not this is completely fine based on the kind of users which you want to add or remove. You can add appropriate users to the private user group. And you can also enable delete lines after posting. So this is primarily when the safety stock journal is posted. If you do not want the lines to be visible in the journal, you can, if you want to delete those lines immediately after posting, then you need to enable this. I will also show this in the safety stock journal once it is created. Right now I'm just keeping it as disabled. Let me save this. So once the safety stock journal is created, then what we have to do is we need to run the safety stock calculation. So in order to run that, you need to get into master planning, and in the master planning you have the option to run the safety stock calculation. So if you want to run the safety stock calculation, before you have to create a safety stock journal, and the moment you click on new, the system will ask you to update the journal name. So this is the journal name which we recently created, and it picks the description. And you can also see the delete lines after posting is disabled. You can also enable this if you want, or you can simply disable it, because it picks from the configuration what we have in the safety stock journal. And let me click on save. And what we have to do is you can either manually add the line if you want to kind of add or do the safety stock calculation for specific items, or you can also use the option of create lines. So example, if I click on create lines, by default it fetches the from date and to date for the last 1 year. So based on the last 1 year of transaction, if you want to generate all the lines and for which you have the minimum quantity, for those lines the system will automatically pick for which the safety stocks are available, already configured in the system. So all those items will be picked in these journal lines. So let me go back a couple of years back. And even in this case, you have the option to provide certain filtrations if you want to include specific items based on the coverage group. Ideally, it is done at the coverage group level. If you have, because we already discussed about it, based on the replenishment method, whether it is min max or period or decoupling point, based on the coverage group and the replenishment method, it can also be done. But right now, I'm just trying to keep this based on the date range. And then also, it is recommended to calculate the standard deviation. I will tell you why this is recommended. Probably I'll just enable this right now and click on OK. So the next step is primarily we need to calculate the proposal. When we calculate the proposal system, if we have enabled the standard deviation, then only we will be able to do the proposal based on the service level. So I'll quickly explain that also, but it is recommended to enable the standard deviation. So yeah, so here if you see that wherever the minimum inventory levels are, so for this item A002, the minimum quantity that we updated is 100, and that is also picked. And we have many other lines which get fetched over here. And you can also see there are 3 important columns, I would say. Forget about the other columns what we have here. But based on the site and warehouse level, and of course if you have any configurations done at the product dimension level, those also will be picked by the system. And what is the current minimum inventory quantity? So this is the current safety stock which is available in the release products. And once we calculate, click on calculate proposal and calculate the safety stock calculation, then the system will calculate the minimum inventory quantity. And at any point in time, you can also update the new minimum quantity. I think new minimum quantity that is expected to be updated back in the release products. So that is where this safety stock journal is actually used. So if I click on calculate proposal, so the system is going to give us 2 options. One, either parameters is used to calculate based on a specific multiplication factor. So let's say by default, if I want to, for these items which are captured over here, I always wanted to maintain a minimum stock inventory level of 2 times or 2.5 times. You can always do that. And or you want to do it based on a service level, based on what is the fulfillment or average issues which are happening for this item, or we want to maintain 50% of the issues, or 99% of the issues, or 90% of the issues. But this service level can be done if you have enabled the standard deviation in the previous screen. But if you have not enabled, then you will not be able to do that, because the system tries to understand what are the average issues per month, and based on which the system generates and recommends the minimum inventory. So you can also provide a lead time margin. So similar to the safety, similar to the other margin, lead time margins which we have seen in the coverage group, This lead time margin is the additional lead time which will be added over and above the procurement lead time, and based on which the master planning will try to calculate the fulfillment quantity. So in case if you want to add, but the constraint what we have is this lead time by default is taken for all the items irrespective of the site and warehouse. So the configuration is not allowing us to do this lead time margin at the item level. So this lead time margin whatever we give here, by default it picks for all the items. Let's say if I give the lead time margin of 10 days, it's the 10 days for all the lines which are getting updated over here. So let me click on OK. So this what happens is primarily helps us to generate the lead time, calculate the minimum quantity. So for this case, if you see in the item number 1, we do not see any, I'm not sure why this is. I think here, if you see for some of the lines, the minimum inventory quantity level, as recommended by the system, if you see the current minimum quantity from the released product is this, but the calculated minimum quantity is 0. For example, this item, even though we updated the current minimum quantity as 100, but the system based on the historical of the transactions, the system recommends that you do not maintain a minimum inventory quantity for this item. But at the same time, it also mentions that it is recommended to maintain a minimum inventory for the quantity for the item D0001. So similar to this, based on the history of the transactions, the system will try to recommend the minimum inventory quantity. And for let's say in this case, let's say the new minimum quantity is 100. Let's say I just wish to for these two lines. Let me select all. So let me unselect these two, let me delete all. Yeah, so that will leave us with the two lines which we have, like this line and the item number D0001. Let's say I want to update the calculate minimum in quantity is 0, which is calculated by the system, and the new minimum quantity is the one which will be updated back into the release products. So I will change the new minimum quantity to 0, but instead for this item, let me put the new minimum quantity as I think the system is stuck. So here I will try to update the quantity as 84. Let me unselect this. I think there is a delay. Not able to update. Let me refresh this page again. So I will update it for one line, and for the other line I'm not going to I'll just see if it is getting updated. Ideally it should be updated, but for example, even when you calculate the proposal, so there is an option to copy the use the calculated minimum quantity as the new minimum quantity. So if you do that, once the calculated minimum quantity field is up, that particular column is updated, the new minimum column is also updated as the same. So let me cancel this. So ideally I'm not sure why this is kind of not allowed us to edit. Let me quickly create a new one. Let's see if that works. Safety stock, then create lines. So let me give the date maybe from 2016 April 1. Click on OK. So this will primarily calculate all the lines. We will pick two lines, and for those two lines we will update the minimum quantity so that the safety stock is updated back in the release products also. So that's what we want to see in this video. And I will also share in the meantime when it runs. I'm also sharing this this doc page in the video description, where you can get a detailed overview of what we have discussed right now, and creating the safety stock journal name. And then once the journal name is created, you can run the safety stock calculation, exactly what we have discussed right now. And also you have some details around calculate standard deviation set to yes. Like I said, use the service level option will be enabled only if you set the standard deviation calculate option to yes. And this will give you a detailed overview of each and every field. And because we are not actually discussing about the each and every field over here, And one of the other important aspect is you will be able to also view the average issues during a lead time. For a specific lead time, what are the average issues which happened in the last history, or based on the last history of transactions, you will be able to view that. And let me check whether now it just kind of generated. Okay, so let's pick 2 lines over here. Let me uncheck others. I think let's pick these 2 lines. So I just deleted all others. And so in this case, if we see the calculated minimum quantity is 100 for this item, the calculated minimum quantity is 0, and but still in the system we currently have 100 and 355. 100 is something which we have updated. Let's check for this item D000002. It shows us 355. This 355 primarily comes from the plan section. If I go to item coverage, so if you see for site 1 warehouse 11, it is 355. So this is what the system has picked. But let's not modify it here, but instead if you have, let's say, hundreds of lines for which you want to update the safety stock, so this is how you generally need to update that. If the system has recommended, generally it's better to update the recommended quantity. So let me update this as 10. I just still want to keep some quantity for this particular item. And then once the new minimum quantity is updated, all you have to do is simply you have to post this journal. So once this journal is posted, the quantity will be updated back in the release product. So let's say if I go to this item A0002, instead of 100, it should be 0. So if I go to plan, item coverage, so you see for site 1 warehouse 11, the minimum quantity is 0. Similarly for the other item also, let's quickly check whether it is updated or not. The minimum inventory quantity is updated. So every time when the master planning runs, it primarily checks the safety stock, and based on which it always tried to keep the accumulated quantity what it got from the net requirements over and above the safety stock, and at any point in time it always ensures the safety stock level is maintained. So here also, if you see, the minimum quantity is now updated back to 10. So that's about safety stock journals, and I'll also share the link for this doc in this video description. Please do check out the same. And also I want you to go through this page and take this as a homework, because here if you look at the planning optimization, the recent one launched by Microsoft, there is some differentiation over between what is the safety stock, how it is kind of fulfilled compared to the deprecated master planning. In case of safety stock, it is always fulfilled on today's date plus procurement date. Like I said, it's always the date. Today's date is the date on which you run the master planning based, plus the procurement time is calculated. But in case of the deprecated master planning engine, based on the fulfill minimum. So where this is updated is, if you go into the item coverage under the general section, there is an option to update the fulfill minimum based on whatever the configuration which you have here. Today's date is basically the date on which you run the master planning engine. Today's date plus procurement time. Procurement time is the lead time which you have in the default order settings. And first issue, even though the stock is going to come down, the stock will not be fulfilled only unless we get the first issue transaction for that particular item. So that particular time will be considered in order to update the safety stock. And coverage times, forget about the coverage time fence. This is most about to be deprecated, and I think it's also updated in the doc. Let us check. And this page link also I will share in this video description, where you will be able to take this as a homework and understand how this kind of fulfillment happens based on today's date plus procurement time, and then first issue. And most important point about first issue is fulfillment mode won't try to cover until the next requirement comes in. So you need to have the next requirement comes in based on any demand which comes in, based on which the fulfillment mode comes into picture when the master planning runs. And also we have the coverage time. Forget about the coverage time funds, and like I said, the mode replenishment will no longer be needed. This option will be deprecated. So forget about this. Primarily this will take the coverage time fence, whatever the period which we have given in the coverage time fence, and based on which the system calculates the fulfillment, right? So I think that kind of brings us to the end of this episode. In the next episode, probably we will discuss in detail about the minimum and maximum keys, And we were discussing about when we are generating the safety stock, we were giving the multiplication factor. So if I want to rewind you back, for example, in the case of master planning, when I run the safety stock calculation, so we created the lines, and when we calculate the proposal, so if you see here, the lines are not deleted, we have not enabled the delete journal lines. So here the multiplication factor, we give the multiplication factor, and based on which the system calculates. But if you have any seasonal requirements, let's say for Jan, Feb, March, your minimum inventory quantity should be 80, but for April, May, June, it has to be 800. So if you want to have those kind of multiplication for a factor based on your seasonal requirements, that's where your min-max key will be helpful. But of course, you need to have your replenishment method as min-max if you want to configure both the minimum key and the maximum key for the items. So, but how do we create the min-max key and how do we configure that? That's what we are going to see in the next episode. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel D3 Sweat Talks or follow my profile in LinkedIn. See you soon in the next episode.